never saw him, but every morning I could feel he was there. For 5 days on Monte Cassino, 2 men searched for each other. Thousands of soldiers were fighting below, but on that hill, there were only these 2, and both of them knew one of them was going to go. February 1944. Monte Cassino, Italy. From a distance, the hill looked harmless. Brown rock faces, olive trees, an ancient Benedictine monastery sitting at the summit. Just another unremarkable mountain in southern Italy. But it wasn't. Monte Cassino sat at the very center of what the Germans called the Gustav Line, a defensive system that cut straight across Italy from coast to coast. The Germans had been preparing this line for months. Bunkers carved into the rock, tunnel networks, machine gun positions with firing angles covering every approach. And at the top, in the shadow of the monastery, German snipers who could see every movement below. Allied forces had been trying to take this hill since January 1944. They hadn't managed it. Every attempt ended the same way. Casualties, retreat, regroup. The German defense was extraordinarily strong, and the snipers made everything harder still. Sergeant James Walling described those days this way. When the sun came up in the morning, movement was forbidden, because whoever moved died. During the day, you lay still as stone. At night, you crawled. And on that February morning, the most experienced sniper in the company, James Walling, was given an assignment. There was a German sniper up there. He was very good. He was very dangerous. Walling's job was to find him.
The Battle of Monte Cassino lasted from January to May 1944. Across 4 separate assault waves, Allied forces sustained more than 55,000 casualties over that period. The German Gustav Line was one of the strongest defensive positions constructed anywhere on the Western Front during the Second World War. At 516 meters, Monte Cassino dominated the surrounding terrain completely. That elevation gave German snipers an extraordinary tactical advantage over anything moving in the valley below.
When Walling began climbing the hill, the first thing he noticed was the smell: gunpowder, blood, and decay. The rocks of Monte Cassino had been carrying that smell for weeks. Behind every stone there was a story. In every hollow, a trace of something that had happened there. On the first day, Walling looked for a position. He settled behind a large group of rocks. From there, he could see both upward and down. He readied his rifle, took out his scope, and began to wait. Hours passed. Nothing. The German sniper was good, very good. Walling already knew that. 2 men from the company had gone down with single shots over the past 3 days. Both of them experienced soldiers, careful men, but not careful enough. On the second day, Walling moved his position. He climbed higher. There was wind, and it was cold. The rocks were wet. Every step carried the risk of slipping, but he had to go up because he couldn't locate the German sniper from below. In the afternoon, he caught something small, just below the monastery, behind a large mass of rock. A movement, very slight, less than a second, but Walling's eyes caught it. That evening, he wrote this in his diary. "I saw him, or I may have seen him. I'm not certain. But something moved, and that was enough to start. The duel had begun."
The German defense at Monte Cassino relied heavily on the 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, the 1st Parachute Division, one of the most elite units in the German military, specifically trained for mountain warfare. Most of the division had previously served on the Eastern Front and in North Africa. The German snipers at Monte Cassino were drawn from this experienced pool of men and exploited the terrain advantage with exceptional effectiveness. Allied forces found them nearly impossible to counter using conventional infantry tactics.
On the morning of the 3rd day, Walling had a decision to make. He had been watching and waiting for 2 days. He knew the German snipers' general area now, just below the monastery, behind the large rock mass. But exactly where? Which angle was he firing from? Morning or afternoon? Walling decided to set a trap. He turned to the young soldier beside him. His name was Tommy Briggs, 19 years old. Walling told him, "Get behind that rock over there. Put your helmet on a stick. When I count, raise it slowly, just a few centimeters. Then bring it straight back down." Briggs swallowed. He understood what was being asked. "What if he hits it?" he said. "He'll hit the helmet, not you," said Walling. "But I'll see exactly where he's firing from." Briggs fixed the helmet to the stick. Walling was ready, scanning every direction. Walling counted. Briggs raised the helmet. The shot came within 2 seconds. The helmet flew. Briggs dropped flat, didn't make a sound. Walling tracked the angle of the shot with his eyes, southeast, the left side of the rock mass, and a slight upward angle from below. Now he knew. Walling spent that night without sleeping. He ran the calculation over and over in his mind. Distance, approximately 400 meters. Wind coming from the west. The morning sun would rise from the east. It wouldn't blind the German sniper, but it could blind Walling. He would have to wait for morning. And morning could change everything.
Tactics. Decoy tactics were widely used in sniper duels throughout the Second World War. Using a helmet or dummy figure to draw enemy fire and identify a position was standard procedure. However, the tactic carried serious risk. An experienced sniper could recognize the trap and simply continue waiting for a real target. The rocky terrain at Monte Cassino made these tactics particularly difficult to execute effectively. The broken ground offered poor concealment and limited movement options for both sides simultaneously.
On the morning of the 4th day, Walling was in position before the sun came up. He had crawled in through the darkness. His hands were bleeding. The rocks were sharp and unforgiving, but he had reached the spot. He had chosen a new position based on the calculations from the night before. From here, he would be coming at the German sniper from the left side, and the sun wouldn't take his eyes. He waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, nothing. Walling began to doubt himself. What if the German had also moved? What if his calculations were wrong? But he didn't move, because moving would ruin everything. At the end of the 3rd hour, the wind shifted, and with that shift, Walling caught something small. At the left edge of the rock mass, catching the first light of the sun, a metal surface caught the light, just for a moment. But it was enough. Walling took aim. He held his breath. He forgot everything else. The sounds of battle below, the cold, the pain in his hands. There was only the point where that light had flashed. He waited. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, then movement came, small but real. A shoulder, maybe an arm. Walling fired. Silence. A long silence. Walling waited. It could still be a trap. But that silence was different. Something had changed in the air. On the 5th day, no American soldier was hit. On the 6th day, either. Walling wrote a single line in his diary. "I think it's over, but I don't feel like there's anything to celebrate."
Sniper activity at Monte Cassino was a factor that significantly affected combat capacity on both sides throughout the battle. German snipers had brought Allied daytime movement to a near-complete standstill. American and British units were forced to move the majority of their supply runs, evacuations, and reconnaissance operations into the hours of darkness. This created serious strain both logistically and psychologically. The elimination of a sniper threat represented something far beyond a small tactical gain. It restored a degree of freedom of movement that had direct consequences for everything that followed.
When Walling came back down, his commander was waiting for him. "Is it done?" he asked. "I think so," said Walling. They didn't say anything else. Walling went into his tent and lay down properly for the first time in 5 days. He needed to sleep, but he couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing. That flash of metal, that shoulder, and that silence. For 5 days he had been hunting a man, and he had found him. But what did he feel now? Nothing. That was what frightened him most, feeling nothing. The young soldier Briggs came over. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. He held one out to Walling. Then he sat down without saying a word. He just sat there. Walling described that moment later this way. "Briggs didn't ask anything. He just sat beside me. I'm grateful to him for that, because if he had asked, I wouldn't have known what to say." The Battle of Monte Cassino was still going. Gunfire was still coming from below. Artillery, machine guns, screaming. The hill was still in German hands. Walling had found 1 man, but the hill was still there. And 2 weeks later, Walling's company received new orders to climb again. Walling picked up his rifle and got ready. because the war wasn't over. Only one part of it was.
Psychological exhaustion at Monte Cassino was as serious a problem as physical casualties. Cases of combat fatigue among Allied units who had been held under sustained defensive pressure rose dramatically over the course of the battle. Soldiers who had spent days lying completely still under sniper threat developed severe anxiety and sleep disorders. Post-war assessments found that the vast majority of Monte Cassino veterans carried long-term psychological effects that stayed with them well after the fighting ended.
May 1944. After 4 months and 4 assault waves, Monte Cassino fell. When Polish forces reached the summit, almost nothing remained of the monastery. The walls had come down, the roof had collapsed, but the hill was in Allied hands. Walling watched that day from a distance. He saw the flag go up. The men around him shouted, embraced, wept. Walling watched in silence. He told a journalist afterward, "I looked at the hill. I looked at those rocks where I had spent 5 days. There was a man up there. I didn't know his name. I never saw his face. But for 5 days we were there together. It's a strange thing, to be that close to your enemy without ever seeing him." That sentence carries the essence of Monte Cassino. From a distance, war looks like large armies and large decisions. But from the inside, it is made of small moments. A flash of metal, a shoulder, a single shot, and the silence that follows.
The fall of Monte Cassino directly changed the course of the Italian campaign. With the Gustav Line broken, Allied forces began pushing toward Rome and entered the city in June 1944. However, military historians continue to question the cost of the Monte Cassino campaign to this day. 4 months of fighting produced more than 55,000 Allied casualties. Some historians argue that different tactical approaches could have reduced that number significantly, that the hill did not have to cost what it did.
James Walling went home to Ohio after the war. He lived in a small town. He became a carpenter. He didn't talk much. His neighbors knew him as a calm, measured man. He never spoke about the war, but every morning he woke up early. His wife had noticed. "Why do you always get up so early?" she asked him one day. Walling thought for a moment. Then he said, "Habit. You need to be ready before the sun comes up." His wife didn't understand. She couldn't have. Those 5 days on Monte Cassino stayed inside Walling somewhere. A man whose name he never knew, whose face he never saw. But for 5 days they had existed together among the same rocks, under the same wind, in the same cold. Both of them wanted to stay alive. Both of them were waiting. Both of them were afraid. One of them made it. Monte Cassino is still there. The monastery was rebuilt. Its white walls catch the sunlight. Tourists come, take photographs. The hill is quiet and beautiful. But among those rocks, for 5 days, 2 men held their breath. War is sometimes this small. 2 men, 2 rifles. And the question of who can wait longer.
It did. Monte Cassino continues to be one of the most studied battles of the Second World War, both in terms of military history and human cost. Thousands of visitors come to the memorial cemeteries there every year. Historians treat Monte Cassino not simply as a victory, but as a concrete example of the lasting marks that war leaves on the people who pass through it, marks that no armistice can fully erase.